Okay, so we're on to episode 7 of season 1, and that is Ghost in the Machine. And this is one that I think once I started watching it, I remembered more about the more the episode went on. It's probably not one of the more famous ones, is it, Brian?
Probably not one of the most loved, no.
So this episode opens at HQ of a large conglomerate where a sort of humble yet dedicated hard worker seems to argue with a smart and savvy businessman. And it seems like the dishevelled kind of guy, it was his company at some point, but now it's been kind of taken away from him.
Yeah, this is Eurisco is the name of the company, and the dishevelled looking man, or the scruffy mind as he later refers to himself as, is Brad Wilczak. I can't remember the name of this actor, but everything I saw him in after this episode of The X-Files, he basically played this character. He was basically the nerdy computer science geek type, and he seems to have been typecast in that role ever since. He played something similar in a couple of episodes of Smallville as well. He was the nerdy scientist guy. So in this scene, I find it really jarring because his performance is so over the top. I think he calms down a bit as the episode goes on, but I don't know, this opening scene to me feels very wooden, very stilted in the dialogue and the way it's performed.
Mm-hmm. It's got to say about the way that the cast are dressed as well. You've got the smart businessman who you instantly, or I did anyway, hated, and then you've got this guy sort of like casually dressed who's just passionate. And, you know, it's an easy setup, but you instantly, or I liked Brad, and I hated the other guy, the CED I was calling him, the Chief Executive Douche. I just didn't like him at all.
Yeah, it's pretty much set up that way, and it just from the way they're dressed, you know who the bad guy is, you know who the good guy is.
So after that, it's like, Brad is left, and then you start to see like CCTV watching the douchebag chief executive, and then it lets you know that COS is watching.
Yeah, Central Operating System.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like we see that the computer, or we don't really know that, we just see CCTV and things like that are watching it, and then after that scene it moves to the sort of businessman as he's leaving his office when he hears the tap running.
Yeah, he goes to the bathroom, doesn't he? And yeah, there's a flood in there. The tap's kind of just been constantly running. I don't know how the computer managed to block the sink, but it's all a ploy by this computer to kind of draw him in and electrocute him, basically, because everything in the room is electronic. And when he sticks his key into the door, the computer has basically switched some switch inside the mechanism that completes a circuit and means that he gets electrocuted.
Yeah, get to that point in a wee bit, because this, you know how I like to make like absent-minded faux pas, and this is, why is there a telephone in the toilet? Right, it's in his office. Has he got IBS or something and he needs to make a serious call? It just seems really weird.
I'm just going to assume that this CEO just never, ever wants to miss a call.
Really? I mean, can you imagine holding like a business meeting while you're sitting there?
Squeezing one out.
Yeah. We need to have a look at the profit quarters of period 4. And then,
you had to go there, didn't you?
I really did. So then we got the theme music, and pretty after that...
Just before we get there, can I just say how obvious is the setup here when the computer, the COS electrocutes this guy, or Skynet, whatever you want to call it, electrocutes this guy, and then we hear this voice that says, "File deleted." It's just, okay, right, we know exactly where this episode is going then. No surprises.
We get into the theme music, and then we start into the episode properly, and we're at the FBI HQ, and we've got this FBI agent looking for Mulder. It's Jerry.
Yeah, so this is an old partner of Mulder's, and Mulder doesn't look too happy to see him, it's got to be said. He has a clear recognition of who this guy is. He goes over and talks to him, and there seems right off the bat to be a little bit of animosity there, a troubled past, so to speak.
Well, Jerry's basically there for one reason, to bring Mulder in to help him with a case.
Yeah, he seriously wants help with the case.
Yeah.
As he puts it, he needs another feather in his cap to smooth things over with the attorney general.
So we get told straight away that, he's made a mistake previously, and his jacket's on a shaky nail, so to speak. So after that scene, you've got Mulder and Scully chatting about Jerry, and I think Mulder says he's a good guy who misplaced evidence.
Forgot a judge's arm and eye lost.
Yeah, it's just, he's a good guy that mislaid evidence.
But it's just there's you kind of get the sense from what Mulder's saying that this guy did make a genuine mistake, as opposed to losing the evidence in a dirty cop kind of way.
He's not corrupt, he's just incompetent.
Yeah, really incompetent. But I do like the relationship. This is actually my favourite thing about this episode, is the relationship between Mulder and this guy. And in many ways, it really reminds me of the relationship between Scully and the guy from Squeeze. If you remember, there was that other FBI agent. And in fact, when I've not watched X-Files for a while, I do get certain elements of their storylines crossed over in my head. I think because it's so soon after that episode, seeing an old partner of Mulder's after we recently saw an old partner of Scully's, and he seems to be a ladder climber as well, although an incompetent one, whereas the other guy was kind of a bit more had a bit more wits about him, I think. I like this element of the episode. I like the fact that actually this guy, he needs Mulder's help, and he pretty much says as much. He admits as much.
Yeah, but it reaffirms the fact that Mulder, although he may have the X-Files on his mind, he's an extremely competent detective or agent.
Yeah, very competent. He's not in the basement because he made a screw up like this guy did. He's in the basement because he chooses to be there.
And that's why he's sort of terrifying the top brass, because he is good at what he does. But in this whole scene where Mulder and Scully are talking about Jerry, you do keep going to the CCTV, which is watching them, and then they're in the elevator, and it stops abruptly and starts to act up, and then suddenly kicks back in and takes them up to the floor that they're going to. Yeah,
that's straight after Scully makes a comment, or Mulder makes a comment about a politically correct elevator.
Yes.
And it kind of makes you think that was that a little jab at them for them making that comment about the elevator? In which case, why is the computer getting offended? Because the computer itself isn't an elevator, it's a computer.
Yeah, but it also stops as well, and Scully phones the help desk, or the desk for help, and says who she is.
Yes, which is the real reason for this. It's basically, obviously reads that they're FBI agents, maybe from their badges. I don't even remember actually if they were wearing the badges at the time, but it gets her number, gets her address, gets her number, so it can, as we later see, will tap into her home computer.
So then it goes to the murder scene, and like you were saying earlier on, it shows you the electronic board that the switch was made that turned the key pretty much into an electrocution device. Now, this is probably the biggest problem I had with this episode. Why on earth would there be a switch that allowed that key to turn it into an electrocution device? Why would that even be a possibility to do that? Like, logistically thinking, at what point is somebody's going to go, you know what, this needs to be live, this key? It just seems, and it's not even behind any security device either. It's like a toggle switch. They open the door and they show you, look, it's live. It's not. It's live. It's not. It's
Yeah, it don't make a lot of sense, to be honest. I mean, I'm not an electrician. I'm not a engineer, so I don't know if there is an answer to that question, but I certainly understand the confusion.
I can't imagine ever having to run live electricity through a keyhole. It was the sort of biggest problem I had, but it's not a major one at that. And then this is when the security engineer enters. That is a security engineer, isn't it?
Yeah, apparently. Yeah, it's the. I just kept on referring to him as the black dude because I didn't catch his name when he came in, but he's.
Don't know.
Yeah. So he's this security engineer, and he basically kind of just comes in, gives a little bit of information, and basically it's planned. We're setting this character up for the fact that he's going to come later. We can't just have him come in at the end of the episode without knowing who he is. So he's there for about 20 seconds, and then he disappears.
And during this scene, Mulder spots that the phone's off the hook. Seemingly the only person that's actually noticed that out of everybody that's been in and out of this murder scene. Yeah, again.
Yeah, I mean, in all fairness, he says it's off the hook, but it's not like it's laying at the side of the phone. It's literally just like he just taps it, so it's not quite set down on the phone. It's still just kind of hung off. So you could understand someone missing that.
Yeah.
But again, it does show Mulder's observation skills. It shows his intelligence. It shows his reasoning. And I just love the little comment that Jerry says just after Mulder finds that bit of information. And he looks at Scully and he says, taught him everything he knows. And then Mulder gives this look like, yeah, what a douche. It's like he just looks at Scully. It's like, I know, he's a douche.
Yeah.
I had to put up with that for however many years I worked with him.
And then it jumped to a scene that I didn't really know what was happening there. It's Mulder looking for his notes, for his profiling of what he thinks the suspect will be, and he's digging through all his files and he just can't find it. And Scully comes in and drags him out because they've got a meeting they have to go to.
Yeah.
And then it's straight into Jerry giving this very professional, very articulate, very to the point profile of the suspect, where Mulder's face takes a funny turn as he realises that Jerry is using all of his notes to make himself look good.
Which he had to literally break into Mulder's office to get. I mean, that's how desperate this guy is. But this is another scene that reminds me of that relationship between Scully and the other guy from Squeeze. Because if you remember in Squeeze, we had that scene with her giving the debrief to the higher-ups, and her old partner, friend, whatever you want to call him, was there as well. And while this scene doesn't necessarily play the same, it has that familiarity about it that just reminds me of that episode.
There is parables between those two, but whereas Scully was obviously...
Well, Scully was allowed to show her intellect there. She was allowed to read her profile, whereas in this one, Mulder isn't. His profile is taken from him and used by someone else.
But you can't help but feel if the shoe was another foot, Scully would have done something about it or said something about it. Where Mulder
definitely
just kind of shrugs his shoulders and he's hurt.
He's sympathetic to this guy. I think. I think Mulder's caught between a rock and a hard place because he wants to help this guy, and if this dude if Jerry had have come to him, and Mulder says as much a little later on because Mulder confronts him, but if he'd have just come to him and asked, then I think Mulder would have given him that profile. But
without a doubt, quite happily as well, because I don't think Mulder needs the approval of his bosses. I think he's going that long with everybody calling him spooky and putting him down. He just really doesn't care what anybody else thinks. The only thing he wants to get to the bottom of is the X-Files.
Well, on top of that, Mulder actually goes out of his way to pit off his bosses at times.
Yeah.
Again, another reference from Squeeze, in which he tells Scully that... I mean, I can't remember what the quote was, but he just... it was about the need to freak people out outweighs the millstone of humiliation. And so, yeah, he has no need to break that case. As far as he's concerned... It's the kind of case that he doesn't concern himself with. Mm-hmm. It would help him climb the ladder, but to a place that he doesn't want to be. So, as far as he's concerned, Jerry could have that stuff. But the fact that he didn't ask for it, he took it, is what annoys Mulder here.
Mm-hmm. In the next scene, you alluded to it already. Mulder confronts Jerry.
Yeah, and Jerry just brushes it off.
Yeah. And it seems, like you said earlier on with Scully's old partner as well, and this partner, it seems as if every other FBI agent is in it for themselves and they're playing the game of office politics. And the only people that aren't willing to do that, seemingly so far, have been Scully and Mulder. In their own way. They, like you said, Scully seems to go for the truth. Whether it benefits her or whether it doesn't. That's just her aim, is to get the truth.
Yeah.
Mulder's not interested in all these office politics because it doesn't further his agenda of finding out anything more about the X-Files.
No.
Yeah, and it also creates this thing that every other FBI agent is just a prat.
They are basically all career-minded, that's the thing, isn't it? And that's the difference. That's what separates Mulder and Scully from the rest of the FBI. They're truth seekers, and everyone else are career ladder climbers.
And just at the end of that scene, Mulder covers for Jerry when Scully comes up and says something. It's a passing comment. He doesn't tell her the complete truth, and he just kind of says a comment. She takes it for what it is, and then she brings up the character of Brad.
Yeah, she comes back with the phone number that the... So basically when the CEO guy who got electrocuted in the bathroom, when he picked up that phone, because the phone rang, they have traced that number back and it goes to Brad's house. So this is the scruffy-minded guy from the beginning.
Right. So I seem to have missed that, because what I assumed it was that the head of security had come back with his list of names of who could have had access to the computer. And there was only one name on it, and it was Brad.
Right. Maybe I've missed something. I thought it was that phone call. I thought they traced back... Because Mulder picked up on that phone receiver being off the hook, they traced the last call that was from it. And obviously the central operating system has kind of rerouted a call from Brad's house to there. I could be wrong. I could have completely... just made that up in my own head, but that's how I interpreted it anyway.
Either way, they need to go to Brad's house to further the story.
Yeah. Basically, he's the prime suspect. He's the guy who's just been fired by the guy who's just been killed. So he is the one with the most motive. Yeah.
So we go over to Steve Jobs' house just after he's been fired for the first time from Apple, and. He's doing all the wacky things. He makes them take their shoes off.
Yeah.
Walk through this elegant house, and Brad's quite happy just to offer himself up as a suspect almost.
Yeah.
Again, he doesn't lie. If he looks like the suspect, that's what it is. He didn't do it. He's quite happy for them to look into it. I think. So, what did you get from this scene?
Just again, I think it gets a little bit preachy, I guess, about corporate scumbags and how they're basically they're all about the bottom line, and people like him who are the ones that we're supposed to respect, the ones that we're supposed to root for. They're the scruffy-minded people. They're the people who like things all over the place, and that's because they enjoy solving puzzles. They don't need everything in nice, neat blocks. But that would be okay if it wasn't for the fact that his house is absolutely immaculate, and it doesn't really fit in line with the person that he's trying to portray himself to be.
Corporate greed, all these people are for the bottom line. Like you said, he's doing something that's the bigger picture, but what is he doing? He's making an automated system so you don't have to lift a finger in the house. It's not as if he's like creating green energy or anything like that, you know. He's making it so you can just sit your fat ass on the couch and do nothing. It's not really a sort of something to strive to create.
Well, what he's actually creating is artificial intelligence, but we just don't know that yet, obviously. We find that out later in the episode. But so far, there's nothing really here that makes me want to like this guy. I don't believe he's guilty. Well, we know he's not guilty. But there's nothing that makes me think, yeah, I'm really rooting for him. Other than the fact that first scene, you know, if it's a choice between a guy in a suit and a guy wearing no shoes, then obviously I'm going to go with the nerdy-looking guy. But from a character standpoint, from the way he presents himself and the things he says, I don't necessarily care for this guy all that much.
I think he's just there to give sort of like a main suspect, you know, a red herring almost. But like you said, it's quite obvious that it's not him.
Yeah.
And in the next scene, we've got Scully doing her best captain's log as she dictates to the computer her profile. And she's putting in everything that she suspects it's Brad. And then she gets up from the computer, walks away, and the computer sparks to life again.
Can I just say as well, when her final words on her field report, I'm not so sure that this meets the professional standards of an FBI field report, because her final line is, if he's so clever, how do we nail him? I can't imagine an FBI agent handing in their field report with that as the final line.
I can't remember exactly what most of our profile is, but it is a case of like, you know, we have no suspects, we have no information. It could be anybody, but it's him. You know, it doesn't seem to be dealing in the facts or that. Most of our other profiles have been quite, you know, like there's information for this, there's information for that. We don't know where it's going to be.
Well, she does talk about his personality profile. So the fact that he's highly intelligent, very, what's the word? Arrogant kind of thing. And yeah, so she basically equates this guy to having the kind of mind that would appreciate pulling off this Columbo level of murder and hoping that, you know, someone couldn't catch him. But
so the PC accesses the computer and steals a report for a look at it.
Yeah, and we end yet again on this scene with another close-up of the computer monitor on the central operating system and the voice saying, "File opened," as if we didn't already know that was what was happening.
But it's funny how in this episode, like, you're not even expecting it to be a person. Like, you know, it's almost showing that it's shot as if it could be somebody hacking into it, but at no point do you suspect it's anything to do with that.
There's no mystery here at all. Right from the get-go, there's no mystery. It's like, as soon as you see that computer talking at the beginning, you're like, AI, Terminator 2, Skynet. I mean, like, when I saw this, actually, just a year before it, I'd seen an episode of Batman the Animated Series, which was basically, again, a rip-off of the Terminator story. This computer that becomes self-aware, creates these Terminator-looking robots. But it just reminded me of that. This came just a year after that episode of Batman the Animated Series. And literally, right from the get-go, it kind of has that feel to it. And even the guy, the Brad character, feels quite reminiscent of the character from that Batman episode who'd created Hardak, the computer that kind of becomes self-aware.
Next up, we've got a scene of Scully and Mulder listening to tapes of Brad. When Jerry turns up, desperate for his next little nugget of information that he's going to steal, and he actually comes begging for help. It's almost as if Mulder's comments previously of, if you had just asked me, I would have told you, has been the only thing that's rang in his ears. So this time he's actually came asking for help.
Yeah, it's like, at least he's learned from this mistake. It's just, one thing that annoys me about TV and movies is when detectives are listening back to a tape recording of something and they get one line and they feel the need to wind it back, play it again, wind it back, play it again, wind it back, and it can literally be just 2 words. Yeah. And we start this scene with Scully. Like you say, she's listening to these tapes of Brad, and he mentions about how he wanted to incorporate other Eastern philosophies, as he says. And she winds it back. It's other Eastern philosophies. She winds it back, Eastern philosophies. She winds it back, philosophies. It's like, why do you need to hear those particular 3 words as many times as you do? I don't get why she's winding that back. I would understand if she was winding back like, a good chunk of the tape and then listening it all back. But they do it in films and TV shows all the time, and I never understand why an agent would need to hear those same 3 words again and again and again.
Yeah, but usually it's pertinent information that comes in handy later on. This has absolutely nothing to do with anything.
No, it's just completely irrelevant to anything that goes on later on in the episode.
Yeah. So Mulder's outside the door talking to Jerry when Scully says that she's found something, and Mulder kind of looks at Jerry and then deliberates and says, yeah, come on in. You can find out what it is as well. And it's basically, they've cut out parts of Brad's speech to see if it was him that said the type.
Yes.
So this is another little query I've got with this that just didn't sit right with me. So they match up the sound patterns, they stretch them out, they do whatever they do, and then they have the graphs, the one at the top and the one at the bottom. And they show the wavelines, and they're pretty much similar. And much to my horror, Scully picks up a red marker and starts to draw on the screen.
I've never understood this. I was like, did she literally just draw with a marker pen on the screen just to show them a place she could have pointed to with her finger?
And I was starting to go, like, how cheap were screens back in the day? They were just allowing agents to draw on them with markers. And it's not as if it's a big screen. It looks about 14 inches, so it's not as if the graphs are that far apart that you can't tell they're the same thing. She just circles 2 bits on it. And I was like, wow.
Now, there is a... Just before that scene, actually, when we had Jerry coming back to Mulder and literally and asking him this time, there was a nice bit of interplay there in which Mulder tells Jerry that he's a good agent, and Jerry kind of like, no, actually, I'm not, and Mulder's like, no, you are, and Scully's like, how would you know? You were too busy dazzling them up there on the high wire. And it's like, it kind of really feeds that perspective of, you know what, Mulder could be right at the top of the FBI by now if he'd have played his cards right. If he didn't go for all this weird X-File nonsense, he'd be the top agent. He'd be an assistant director by now. Because, like Jerry says, he was dazzling them, and all of a sudden he just took this turn and he peed it all down the drain, basically, for the sake of these X-Files.
So in our next scene, we have Brad trying to hack the COS, and he can't, so he jumps in his car and drives away and is followed by Jerry. So they arrive at the building,
Jerry, basically, he wanted the collar. He wanted to do it alone.
Yep.
And when he asks Mulder that, actually, to let him have this one, Mulder gives him this look that it's almost like a "go get him, kid" kind of look. You feel like a sense of pride in Mulder for his ex-partner. I'm not sure I could go so far as to call him his friend, but there's just this look that Mulder gives that kind of gives you a sense of his compassion, I think. Because I don't think we always see Mulder's compassionate side, because he's always a bit too dour. He's always a bit too sarcastic. It's hard to kind of get that kind of read on him. But there's a definite moment there, I think, where there is a genuine compassion for this former partner of his.
I had pretty much the same take on you. I took it as a sort of sibling, almost like a big brother and a little brother, and the big brother saying, "Yeah, you go," and the little brother so excited to like run out and make this call. Just like, I'm going to get that feather in my cap. So they go to the main building of is it Euroscope or
Eurisco? Yeah,
Euroscope.
Which basically means I discover things.
So they go to the main building of Euroscope, and Brad gets to the computer. Jerry follows him in and goes in the lift, and Brad's trying to hack into the system, and the system starts to talk to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, "You don't have voice control, or you don't have voice synthesizer." And then the computer stops the lift with Jerry in it, shows Brad the TV, what's happening, and much to Brad's dismay, drops the elevator and kills Jerry.
See, this is my biggest problem with the episode, is all of the control over the electronic systems that this computer has in this building, and it doesn't shut off the cameras that show Brad clearly not being in control of the situation.
Right, but I don't know if it doesn't. I don't know if it shows you that, because you can't see Brad's hands when he's over at the screen.
But without that footage, Mulder wouldn't be able to make that connection. It's only because of that footage in which Brad is clearly stood there kind of shouting at the monitor and just clearly not in control, that he starts to make the leap that it's the computer.
Could you not argue that he's standing there shouting, "Die"?
Die, you bastard, die. Yeah, I don't know. To me, it seems like, you know what, if you're going to kill someone, shut the cameras off. Yeah. Even if there's the slightest possibility that visual evidence could lead them back to you, turn the cameras off. You the central operating system, you've got control over them. We know he's got control over them because we always get them shots of the cameras moving back and to. So, yeah, I don't know. To me, it just seems a bit...
So, in our next scene, we've got Mulder watching Jerry's death and Brad at the console. And I think Scully comes in and apologises about the death of Jerry and says that... And Mulder says straight out the bat, and Kenny takes her aback when he says, "I don't think Brad did it."
Yeah.
And Scully thinks Mulder's been through a lot and tells him he should go and speak to a counsellor or something before she mentions that Brad has actually confessed to this.
Mulder says Brad isn't guilty, but Scully tells him he's just signed a confession.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really where the only little bit of mystery comes into this episode, I feel, is why did he sign that confession? But beyond that, there isn't really much else to say. I mean, I do like seeing Mulder's reaction to Jerry's death. I think there is genuine love there for this guy, even though, as we've said, he was completely incompetent.
I think a bit of responsibility as well. He did let him go on his own to do it.
Bit of survivor guilt kind of thing.
Yeah.
Can I just say as well? This is something I missed, but when Brad runs into the Erisco company to go and try and shut down the computer, for some bizarre reason, the director of this episode shifts his stylistic choices to something that resembles the Batman 60s TV series. Because all the shots are sideways. Like, he runs up the stairs into the building and the camera looks literally like it's just fallen on its side. And then in the lift we see Jerry and the camera is on its side, it's tilted, and it's just like, did Joel Schumacher just suddenly take over the directing duty on this episode?
I love the way when he runs in the building as well, the security guard says his name, even though he knows that he's been removed from the company. He doesn't care, he just lets him in. Okay.
It's like, your clearance has been revoked, but sure, just breeze on through.
So our next scene has Mulder going to Brad's house, where yet again he discovers more Men in Black.
Yeah.
Who tell
Code
him,
5.
Yeah. Who tell him that even though he, what is it he put on the house? It was a
subpoena.
Yeah, even though Mulder subpoenaed the house, they've went above him and they've got a better subpoena.
They've subpoenaed his subpoena. Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Their subpoena's bigger than his subpoena, and he has to go home.
They're all waving their subpoenas about.
It's a subpoena measuring contest.
Yeah.
And Mulder loses out. So he only has one course of action. Now, it's quite funny, just as this episode was about to start, I was like, we haven't seen any more of this Deep Throat character that we've seen in episode 2.
Deep Throat.
Deep Throat, yeah. And I was just going like, is he going to come back anytime soon? And boom, there he is. And
yeah, I kind of feel like I wish they'd have saved him for a better episode, really.
Yeah.
Like this episode doesn't really feel like it's going to have far-reaching consequences later on in the series, and being the X-Files fan, I can tell you it doesn't. So it feels a bit of a waste to this character, but I guess it just brings him back just to remind you, hey, he's there. He's giving Mulder information now and again.
And the thing that kind of set me off about this one was, we've seen Mulder earlier on where he was getting his house phone was tapped, and you get that sort of inclination that he's being watched. And then they're meeting out in public. Like, you're not going to try and be a little bit more covert about it and go somewhere where they're not going to be seen, but they're just walking out and about where anybody could see them together. I don't know, there was something about that just made me feel a bit, I think they'd be a little bit more secretive.
Yeah, I mean, Deep Throat says himself, doesn't he? He's not best pleased about Mulder calling on him on this occasion. He comes walking up the stairs, Mulder pops out, and then he's like, I don't really appreciate you kind of pulling me out on this one. So, yeah, it kind of begs the question, if he's not best pleased about him pulling him out, why didn't he meet somewhere a little bit more discreet? Yeah.
And then the next scene we have, it's in Brad's cell, and Mulder is asking him why he's protecting the machine. And the simple answer is that he doesn't trust the evil government, so he won't tell them that the computer is sentient. Yeah,
I mean, like, Deep Throat has all but told us that what Brad has done is create AI, and that's what the DoD are after.
So again, you've got that statement from Brad that the government is evil and everything they do is distrustworthy and not for the good of man almost. It's just reaffirming a constant theme throughout this series so far that the government is not to be trusted. They are not telling us everything. They are not looking out for our best interests. They are bad people.
Yeah. And Brad basically equates himself to the likes of Oppenheimer and people like that. So
yeah.
Nice to see that he thinks so highly of himself.
So Scully doesn't buy the sentient machine. She blames Jerry's death. Oh, what have I got here? Right, so Scully doesn't buy that it's a sentient machine that killed Jerry. And Mulder doesn't really argue the point with her yet again. You know, we've seen this a couple of times in the series when Scully's dead set on something. Mulder doesn't try to win her over or argue against it. He just kind of...
I feel like in this case, Mulder doesn't really feel like it's worth the energy, worth the effort. And also he's well aware that what he is about to do is an illegal action. He is going to get this virus off Brad and then try and take it into the building and upload it into this computer. So I think much of it has to do with him not wanting to bring Scully into this, not wanting to drag her in, because the potential there is that actually there could be serious repercussions for what they're about to do. So I think Scully kind of says that she doesn't think Brad is the guilty party, so he's just like, all right, fine, fair enough, see ya.
But even though they do the job together that Mulder's thinking about doing, there is still no ramifications. It's as if these two don't know they're like the lead actors in a TV show or something. It's crazy. So like you said, we've got Mulder taking the laptop to Brad to create the virus.
I love the way he brings that in. It's like he's brought in some dodgy porn. It's like he's in a prison. He's like, does this help? And then he just like lifts up the laptop.
Does he not like carry it in? He has a shifty look left and right. Then he opens it and he goes, "How long do you need?"
He's literally like, just pass the tissues and he's done. You know. Oh, good grief.
But then you've got the operating system calling Scully and looking at all the reports from the PC.
I have no idea why this happens.
Yeah, because it's not a new report. It seems to be the same one that it's looking at again.
That's exactly what I put in my notes. I put, why would the central operating system need to download a report that it's already downloaded? And two, why the hell would it... Well, it doesn't really call Scully there, does it? It's just Scully kind of figures what's going on. And
does it not have to call the house to get access to the telephone line, the modem?
Yeah, but...
It wakes it up?
It's just like, again, we're seeing the same report that it's already downloaded. Yeah. I mean, was it just skim reading? Didn't actually pull it off the computer and then thought, oh, actually, I could do with reading that report again.
Maybe it's like, this is just too good to be true. I need to go back and just make sure that this is all...
Did she really put, how do we nail this guy?
Maybe it was some just really exciting prose. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe she wanted to see if she'd changed her report at the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, it makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense.
So if Scully calls and finds out who's hacking her PC, and Mulder has arrived at the HQ when suddenly Scully pulls up right behind him, and they go in, or they try to attempt to enter the barrier using a license plate. Which...
bad analogy as well with the whole... Trojan horse thing, because the Trojan horse was supposed to be a gift, not.
I'm not even sure you could have Eurisco as a license plate. There's no numbers in it. But anyway, they go down to the barrier. It scans their license plate. The barrier lifts and they go in. Now, this is, I'm assuming, AI, which is probably very highly intelligent. So surely it can do some sort of like maths equation to figure out if that barrier would actually crush the car.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Because it comes thundering down and just seems to scrape the top of the car. And the two guys get out. But you got to wonder, is the computer, why would it even lift the gate for them?
No. It just doesn't need to let him in.
Yeah.
Everything it does is giving itself away. But it makes absolutely no sense. I do love the way when they're outside the building, Mulder looks up at the tower and goes, "It's the machine." It's just so stilted. The dialogue is just so stilted.
There's one thing I'm so thankful for, and that is when the barrier comes down and sort of scrapes the car a little bit and the horn goes off. As soon as that happened, I'm like, oh God, I hate these things in movies whenever the horn goes off and it's just this elongated sound that never ends until the people walk away. And then Mulder just walked round to the front of the car, lifted the bonnet and turned the horn off.
Yeah, he pulls the wire out, doesn't he?
I was like, oh, thank God. You know, it's like a small mercy almost. So then you have Mulder and Scully climbing the stairs. And this is my favourite part. Just as they get to the floor that they're going to go in, the computer switches the lights off. Not at number 1. No, it waits till it gets to number 29 and turns the lights off.
Oh man, it's not the most intelligent artificial intelligence,
really
is it?
It really isn't. It's quite funny, but they try to open the door and then they realise that it could be electrocuted. So Mulder whips out some massive gloves and a screwdriver or something.
Yeah, I wrote Mulder comes tooled up. He's proper tooled up with everything he needs to break into this place.
But even if he thinks that it's electrocuted, why does he have to do that? You just not touch it? No? Does that break the circuit or something? Again, we're not electricians. I'm just surmising.
I can't remember what it is he does, to be honest.
He kind of puts on the glove and then just sticks a screwdriver into the keyhole.
Yeah, I think because the amount of electricity he's expecting to be fried with, once it comes through, actually fries the mechanism, so it can't really do it again. I think it's like a one blast kind of thing. I think that's the reasoning anyway that they're trying to give in the episode. It's never truly explained, to be honest. So just like it's never truly explained why you would have a circuit or even a telephone in a bathroom, to be honest.
Yeah. So then you've got Scully getting sent into the air vents.
Yeah, Scully goes all John McClane, not Mulder. Yeah. Again, this is a common pattern throughout the X-Files that we've already witnessed. It's Scully who does the hard man kind of action hero stuff. She's the one who goes up in the vents, even though there's clearly enough room for Mulder to do it.
So she's crawling through that, and it cuts to the doors, and the door just opens, and it's the head of security.
Yeah.
Who takes Mulder through into the computer room while Scully's walking about or crawling about these air ducts, and then the wind starts to pick up. And I never knew that these would carry such vicious winds as they do. Did you notice there's actually debris getting blown at her? You know, the leaves from a tree?
Yeah, it looks like leaves. I'm guessing that those would be pulled in from the roof, but
either that or off a tree.
How many trees?
Yeah, I thought it was maybe off a tree 28 floors below. It somehow managed to pull in. And
just because the fan is so powerful.
Yeah. So this kind of, it jumps between two scenes here. So you've got Scully and the air ducts, and you've got Mulder in the computer room with his makeshift USB stick. Well, we have Scully sort of dangling from an air vent towards the fan at the bottom, and she's trying to sort of shoot at it. And this is when Mulder finally gets access to the computer when the security guy whips out a gun. And
and this is a scene right from Columbo.
Yes.
It's like, not bad, Agent Mulder. Now let me reveal my fiendish plot to you.
Yeah,
it's
so weird and strange, and because we've only seen this guy for 30 seconds, a minute beforehand, and that was right.
It's Scooby-Doo villainy.
Yeah, absolutely, and We
So,
don't cut-
yet again, Scully comes to the rescue.
looking a bit worse for wear.
Yeah.
But she turns up and saves her damsel in distress yet again.
Yeah, so the guy, the security guy, tries to talk her down, tries to make her see reason.
Yep.
But Scully's just not having any of it. She tells Mulder to stick the virus in, and we get what is just a really long death scene for this computer, and it finishes on why.
I misheard it, so I wasn't sure if it was just why, like you said, or whether it was Brad why. You know?
Yeah, it is. No, it is. It's Brad. Why?
Oh man, fun. So then we have a scene with Deep Throat. Yet again, just throwing him back in there. He's just saying that the government have taken Brad, and they basically want to use him for his big brain.
Yeah, basically they want that AI technology. He is now the property of the Department of Defence. Yeah,
absolutely. And then you've got the inside, the operating system room again. You've got the security guy digging through everything. He knows he's got a couple of hours to find something, which he's probably not going to do. And we have the obligatory stinger of a computer sparking to life.
And the excellent last line, which is, "Gonna figure this out if it kills me." And it's like, oh, really? You went there? Mm-hmm. Right, okay.
And that's it, the episode ends. So, like you, Brian, I've had a score for this one, but I'm knocking it down a notch here. I'm just going to put it down. I thought it's a good enough episode, but it's not great. And it's probably the first one where there's not been anything sort of supernatural or unusual. It's an AI. It's something that the man has created. It does have an insight into Mulder and his loyalty that he has with some of his friends. It also shows some of his detective skills and really shows how good he is at his job and how better he is than most agents out there. And it's not the best Scully episode because she seems to be... She almost seems to be edging on becoming a doubting Thomas. You know, where Mulder believes something's happening, Scully's a naysayer, and you can feel it starting to edge into that kind of familiar ground, which you're hoping it's going to break out of pretty soon. You know, because we've had the previous episodes with the Poltergeist where Scully was literally always seconds just too late to see it, type of thing. And
the best episodes of the X-Files, they always have Scully giving a counter argument, but through a scientific means, so that you could believe that actually, you know what, from a rational point of view, I could understand why somebody would think from that perspective. Yeah. And because when you have a story like this that just isn't fleshed out enough, just doesn't give her enough to do, they don't give enough scientific reasoning for her to try and dissuade Mulder from his opinion. Yeah.
That's why I settled on a 2.5 out of 5 for this episode. What about yourself,
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to go the same. I had it at a 3 out of 5, but yeah, as we were discussing it, I clearly wasn't really finding that much about it that I enjoyed. This is an episode actually that I can just stick on and watch and just let it kind of pass by and get some entertainment out of it. And I think that's primarily down to this agent Jerry and the relationship he has with Mulder. I like all that stuff in the episode. I like that it's kind of, it doesn't tell you everything about their history, but it reveals enough to build a picture of their relationship. And I like that. That's all the stuff that I like. So I think everything after that, once Jerry kind of cops it, and we're into that final act, it's all a little bit hokey, a little bit kind of. They just need to get to the end, and they're going to do it by any means necessary, really. Scully gets to be a little bit kick-ass at the end, as per usual. So, it's entertaining, but it's just totally superfluous to the grand scheme of the show, the overall arc, so to speak. You could take this episode out, and it wouldn't really matter a right lot. So, yeah, I'll give it a 2.5 out of 5.
Yeah, it's a good episode. It's just not essential in the whole X-Files canon, I suppose.
Yeah.
So next up is one of your episodes you've been going on about, Brian, Ice.
Yeah, so this is one of my favourite episodes of the first series. Really looking forward to finding out what you think about it. So I guess we'll find that out next time.
Sure. We'll see you next time on the X-Files Revisited.